Well, good morning. This is Dawn with EBS Associates, and this is our Wednesday webinar, and I thank you all for attending. Today we're going to be talking about the Item tab and the Expense tab, and when do you use them, and why are they different, and how do they work. But first I'd like to just give you a little brief introduction to EBS. We are a full-service bookkeeping firm. We do everything from the bookkeeping in your office or mine, your office or ours, I guess it should be. We do consulting, we do training, we do everything up to the taxes. We don't do those. And so what we try to do is to help educate everybody on how's the best way to use QuickBooks. And I'm going to try and get this out of my way. So we're going to get started on the Expense tab and the Item tab. And you're going to see those when you enter in a bill. You have the Expense tab and you have the Item tab. And if I had my preference, I would be able to relabel these because the expenses are my overhead. They're the things that I'm not connecting to a customer. I'm not connecting it to a job. It's my office supplies, my telephone bill, the rent, all of those things that I have to pay in order just to keep my business going. So Expense tab is just that. It's an expense. Now, QuickBooks will let me post not only to my expense accounts, but I could come up here and post to my cost of goods accounts. And I see a lot of contractors and people that want job costing doing that and saying, oh, well, it was material, and it lets me say how much, and it lets me over here put in who the customer job was. And this will do job costing just fine as long as all you want is a profit and loss. But if you want to run any of the job reports that are in QuickBooks, this will not get it to you. We'll look at some of those and we'll see why and what it does. So my Item tab is, of course, if I have any inventory parts, they're going to be an item, but also my non-inventory parts. My non-inventory parts are those parts that I am buying specifically for a customer job. So I always tell all my customers, if it's job related, if you want to get job reports, you need to have an item. So we will pick an item for trim. We're going to put in a quantity. We're going to put in an amount, okay, I guess 95 a piece. And we're going to put in a customer job. And so by putting it in here, I'm going to get all of my job reports that are going to be broken down by my item. And I can use service items, I can use inventory items, I can use non-inventory items, I can use other charges. And last week we talked a little bit about the different types of items. So if it's an item, it's going to be in here. And then you might say, okay, but how do I know what account? When I'm over here on the expense account and I put it to job materials, I know where it's going. When I'm on the Item tab and I put in trim, I don't know where it's going. So before we move on, we're going to look at that so that you can really see the relationship. If you go to your item list, so list, item list, and we're going to find trim, and I'm going to double click on it, and there's two sides to it. So this little box is marked, which means there's two sides. So if I'm spending money, I'm on a bill, I'm on a check, I'm on a credit card charge, this is the account that it's going to go to when I put it on the Item tab on any of those transactions. And it's going to job material, which is just where I want it to go. This is my income account, but that's only when I'm invoicing the customer. So now that we know that our trim is going where we want it to, we can come over and put in who the customer is and whether it's billable or not. So if I'm doing time and billing, I'm going to mark that box so that I can invoice my customer and not have to remember what needs to be invoiced. If I'm invoicing the customer from a quote, from an estimate. If I simply am invoicing them for remodeling cost or construction cost, not for the actual material, I might uncheck it. By unchecking that box, it's still going to get posted to the job. It's just not going to come up as a billable item. So expenses are my overhead. Items are anything that's job related, and of course anything that I'm buying for inventory. So kind of if I know who I'm buying it for, it probably needs an item. If it's just overhead, expense, rent, office supplies, it's going to come into the item tab. I can mix and match. So I can go in and say, well, I also wanted to buy some office supplies at this place, so I can buy $50. So I can have some things on the item tab, some things on the expense tab, a mix and match. Up here on my bill or my check or my credit card, this item is going to be the grand total of both. So I can go back and forth between whether it's billable, whether it's not. One of the things, and I just had a customer email me this morning, that when I come in here and I buy an inventory part and I put it to a specific customer, why doesn't this show up on my job report? And that's because with inventory items, when I'm buying them, which I'm doing here on my bill, it's going to my inventory asset account. It doesn't go to the job profitability until I invoice the customer for this part. So even though on an inventory part I'm specifying who the customer is, it's not going to show up as a cost to that customer until I invoice them for it. The non-inventory part, which was our trim, it will show up on the job immediately because it's automatically going in there. Okay, so I'm going to save that bill. So same thing when I write checks, the same thing, two items, expense tab, item tab. So overhead, job related. I can go back and forth between the two. If I'm using a credit card, I can go back and forth between the two. Okay. And they all work the same. What I can't do is a journal entry. So if I go in and do a journal entry, there is no place to put on here what item I want it to be. So for those of you that are doing job costing, you need to do it on a credit card, you need to do it on a check, you need to do it on a bill. I can't do it as a journal entry because I can put in the expense account, but I can't put in the item for it. So what does it look like? If I come in here and I run my job reports and I run a job profitability detail, and I'm going to do it for Christy's family room. Okay, so here's how I can see what I paid for a wood exterior door. Here's what we paid. There's the $9.50 that we put in for the trim. If we had any payroll, it would be here. And because we used items, we get these really nice detailed reports here on our job that break it down by the items. But down here, remember I put some money in on the expense tab? So down on my job report, it's still costed to the job, but I don't know what it was for. And so I come in and I double click and then I have to look at it to see what it was for. And here's my bill that just went to job materials. So it got costed correctly, but when I look at my job report, it's not broken down as to what parts that it was. Now, if I did a job profit and loss, and I filtered it down for just this one job, so I'm going to go into names. So it shows all my job materials, and if I look here, my $950 and that $1,100 are both still there. So on my profit and loss for the job, it's showing correctly. When I look at the job profitability, the total is correct. This one's not correct. Oh, because we haven't invoiced it. So the dollars go to the right place, but it doesn't show up quite the way I want it to. My profit and loss would be fine. My job profitability has no item. So not a lot to talk about with this except that, okay, let's go in and look at a purchase order because now I'm buying stuff. I only have an item. I cannot go in and buy office supplies on my purchase order. I would have to have an item called office supplies going to my expense office supplies if I wanted to be able to order office supplies, pencils, pens, paper on my purchase order. I would have to create an item for that. And so if I came in here and said office supplies, I would have to set it up, and I would make this a non-inventory item, and this might be one of the few non-inventory items that I don't make two-sided because it's just going to go to my office supplies. So now I have an item. I can put it on my purchase order. I can put it on my bill or my check when I go to pay for them. The other place where we only have items is on any of our customer transactions. So our estimates, our sales orders, our invoices, and our sales receipts, all of these only have an item. And so it's up to the item that is going to get connected to. With using my items, if I'm doing an invoice to Christy, and we go into our time cost. Oh, I'm on an estimate. Can't do time cost on an estimate. Sorry about that. I get this morning message that there are outstanding billable items and cost. And so I'm going to say, okay, here's any time that was entered. Here's any expenses, and this is where there is a little bit of difference, so you have to think about it. Because if I do time and billing, and I'm using items, my items have a set billing price. Regardless of what my cost is, I'm going to bill you at whatever my set price is in my item. If I do expenses, I can come in here and say, I want to mark it up 30%. Make sure you put the percent sign in, otherwise you would just be marking it up $30. And anything that I had listed down here, I would be able to bill it on the invoice. So a lot of people do time and billing, and it's material plus a certain percentage, and so they like to have it here. And if this is your reason for doing it, it makes sense. Just know that when you look at your job reports, it's going to come up and say no item. Okay. My items that I've done are over here, and I can just check them off. But again, it's billing them based on the rate that is set up in the item list. And sometimes it's always something different. So I might have to come in here and change this because I'm only going to bill them $1,500 or whatever. So kind of a difference to be able to look at them, but we should be able to, get in on them. I'm not using two screens today, so I'm going to look in here and see if anybody has any questions. Maybe. Okay. So if you have any questions, please enter them in. You should have a little link for questions, and you can type in there your questions, because I know this is confusing for some people, how to use, how to know which one to use. But it's really pretty straightforward. You've got your expenses, and I'm just going to bring up a check again. So my expense tab is directly related to my chart of accounts. And any asset, current liability, a cost of goods, an expense. I can, from my bill, from my check, from my credit card, I can go in and pick the account specifically that I want it to go to. I can also put these things to customer jobs. So one of the questions you have to ask yourself is, if this is job related, and I'm going to invoice the customer for whatever this is, do I have kind of a preset price that I'm going to bill the customer for? Or am I going to bill them a percentage over cost? So real quick, let's put in a percentage over cost, and we'll just buy it from whoever these people are. And we'll put in a nice even $1,000 so we can track it. And we're going to put it into our favorite job. Okay? So now when we go back and we invoice, we're going to get our same message. And here's our $1,000. Okay? And I can come in and say, I want to bill it at 30%, and I want to bill that item. And what it does is it actually gives me the markup. So now my customer sees, and if I have a time and billing job, my agreement with the customer is probably that I am going to invoice you at 10, 15, 30% over the cost of the actual material. And so they want to see the actual material, and then they want to see the markup. But for a lot of people, we don't want them to see the markup. We just want them to see that we're billing them $1,300. And that's where I would probably use the item rather than the expenses. So when we go in and we look at this invoice, they're going to actually see, here's the material, here's the markup for all the material, and it's going to put them all in there. Now, if I had multiple items, the 30% would be for the total of all of the reimbursed items, not individually. And so, you know, but that's a big difference. So if I'm using the percentage, I need to use the expense tab. The other thing, and I'm going to, because I never use it, so I'm going to see if they fixed it, is it used to be that if I put it into a cost of goods sold account, it would not show up. So I'm going to try this. And we're going to make it $2,000 so I can tell the difference. And so now when we go in and go to our time, okay, it does show up. Up until 2012, if I posted to cost of goods, which is where my job-related costs should go, it wouldn't let me mark it up. It only would let me see expenses. So I thought they had fixed that. So that's one of the things that you can kind of watch for, is having that in there. I'm looking to see if anybody has, okay. I'm not seeing any questions, and I can't believe that I have explained this so well that none of you have any questions. So if you would click in the question and put in there, there's not a lot to really talk about the expenses. I'm not going where I'm going. Except to understand the differences. And once you understand the difference, it doesn't matter if you're on a bill, a check, a credit card. Expenses are my overhead. It's going to the expense. I'm probably not job costing it. I might be putting a class in to break it down between the two different departments, but I'm not posting it to a job unless, of course, I want to do the time and billing and add the percentage to all of the items. That's a real valid reason to put your job-related expenses on the expense tab. If you do an estimate, you've started with items. if you want to, and let's look at that report because that's really important. So if I put in an estimate and then I want to compare how I'm spending money against that estimate, and that one didn't have an estimate, so we'll try a different one. Brian Cooks does. Okay, so Brian had put in an estimate by the item and said, this is what I think I'm going to cost for all of these different parts of this construction. And then if we use the item on the check, the bill, the credit card charge, then I can actually tell, I estimated that I was going to spend this much, but I've really spent this much. And so it doesn't look like Brian's a real good estimator because it looks like he's over. But if I'm not using the items, I'm not going to get this report. So is this a report that has value? Is this a report that you're looking for in your business that you can compare what you thought it was going to cost to what it really cost and then have it show up? So again, down at the bottom is where the no item would be. So whether you're on a bill, whether you're on a check, my expenses is looking directly at the chart of accounts. My items are looking at the item list. I can buy service items, non-inventory items, inventory parts, other parts. So I can buy all of the different items and we can have them all in here. I think I'm going to, rather than just keep rambling, I'm going to see if there's any questions in here. Okay, Bill's got one. Okay. It's one of those things that once you get used to it and start making the decision as to which is the right one for you,